everybody. Good morning. Can I ask everyone to take their seats now, please? Thank you. No, it's fine. They're getting there. They're getting there. Good morning, all. Good morning and welcome to Exist, to our Christmas edition, Christmas event for Exist. I am very, very pleased to hand over to James Cater, who is the chair for Exist now, and he's going to say a few words and some housekeeping before we get going. Okay?
Thank you, Sarah. Wow, we did it. A full room. As Sarah said, I have the honour to take over the responsibility of Exist, the Exeter Initiative for Science and Technology. Passed like an efficient baton from Clodagh. Nice to see Clodagh here. Thank you for passing the baton so well. As some of you know, we weren't originally going to be here at Winslade. We were going to be in Exeter. And I'd just like to say thank you for the early interest, the early engagement in the tickets, which motivated us to come to Winslade, with great parking, great facilities, and even more chairs. So thank you very much. As some of you have probably seen, we've been having to bring in extra tables and chairs this morning. I think we've probably got about 95 people in the room. We are also live streaming globally. And the content will then be available online forever. So I think the audience will be into many hundreds of people as we go forward. I'd also like to ask you to look around the room. One thing you'll notice is that we have a whole new next generation of business leaders here. It's a bit of a different group, a bit of a different demographic. And that's what the Exeter Chamber is all about. Not only serving the business community today, but bringing future leaders through to lead the Exeter business community in the future. And that's a big area of focus for both the Exeter Chamber as well as the Exeter Initiative for Science and Technology, which is Exist. And that's to drive focus on STEM, drive focus on all elements of diversity, and bring the different elements of thought into this business community. I'd also like to thank the great group of presenters this morning from various different global technology brands, advisory organizations, as also world-renowned brands that are located in the greater Exeter area. We're already planning for the next Exist event. I've told the team that we start that at 12:30 today. And the next event, which will probably be in April, May, will also continue to focus on STEM, net zero, and also the new types of energy that we are creating together across the greater Exeter area. So keep a watch out for that. When I speak to businesses, they generally ask me two things. Will AI replace me? And I stole the response from Satya Nadella, who runs Microsoft. And the response that I use is, probably not, but somebody using those tools will. And the other question is, that they ask me, is how do I find out about what I should be thinking about, what I should be considering when I'm hearing about large language models, machine learning, artificial intelligence? And some of those people who have asked me that question are in this room today, because I told them, come to this event, because this event, this leadership edition, is designed to enable you to go back to your businesses, go back to your organizations, and even on a personal level, think how we can all take advantage on these new tools that are now available to us and enhance our productivity, our security, our focus on ecology. So please use the time not only as you're looking this way, but also use the time as you're looking around at everybody else. There's some really interesting organizations represented in the room. There are some long-standing organizations represented in the room. And also there's the next gen of the Exeter community represented in the room. So please take the time in breaks and after the event to network, to get to know each other, and to think not only about this Exist event, but also the next one and the next one and the next one, which will be part of the Leadership Edition series that we're now designing. So thank you for attending. I'd just like to say a fantastic, massive thank you to One Voice Media. I might forget a name, but Jazz, Claire, Lisa, Katie, and most importantly, Rachel. Where are you, Rachel? Hiding behind the pillar. Rachel has been the power, the drive, the keeping me honest for putting this event together. So a big thank you to the One Voice team. And with that, was there any housekeeping things I need to say? I don't think we're expecting a fire alarm. Fire exit. We're not expecting a fire alarm. So if we do get a fire alarm, please go and stand in the rain. And with that, I will hand back to Sarah. Thank you all again.
Thank you, James. Right, we're on a really, really tight agenda today, so I'm going to be whipping people along quite quickly. When we get to questions and answers, we've probably got time for only 2, so if you can please keep them very short and pithy, that would be brilliant. I will remind you after each speaker as well. And we have the team at the back, as James just mentioned, who will also be whipping us along and making sure that we're on time, because as people in the room who know me, I'm really bad at timekeeping, so I need the people at the back waving things at me. Right, so without further ado, I am going to hand on to Dominic Mac. Now, Dom is a partner and Chief Technology Officer at PwC Operate, and he delivers client services in regulation, risk and compliance. He's got over 20 years' experience in building and leading tech-based companies, and Dom's going to be our initial pathfinder at the frontier of artificial intelligence and machine learning. He's going to explain what these terms mean to him, and how the business tools are used by his customers to drive business transformation and enhance the competitive position. Dom?
Wow, I've known James for many years, and I've never known him to finish a speech on time, so well done, James. For those that are wondering as to what that picture is when you saw my previous one, well, that's an AI-rendered picture of me using Leonardo. And when I showed it to my wife, she said, "Are you tripping? That's not you." I said, "No, actually, a Leonardo is hallucinating. It may be 5% thinner, maybe 3% better looking, but this is the power of AI at the moment." So what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, because I've got the honor to be on first, I need to frame what AI is a little bit. But I'm going to do that in a way that I love, because I'm a film buff. Obviously, as a technologist, I'm going to either be a film buff or into Dungeons and Dragons, so I chose film. But I want to do that. Before I do that, I want to talk about how exciting this space is, right? AI, I've been around in AI for 7 years, but now it's got cool. Everyone likes AI. And so there's some really strong words that are coming out at the moment when it comes to AI. So for decades, we've been trying to teach humans the language of machines. But now we're finally teaching the machines the language of humans, and that's really intriguing. And then when you take people like Sam Altman at OpenAI, he's talking about pushing back the veil of ignorance and pushing the frontier of discovery forward. And that's where we're at this particular moment in time of our lives. Very exciting. So what is this AI stuff all about? Now, I'm not going to talk about in detail because this is a non-tech session. around what's the differences between Gen AI, between deep learning, machine learning, and artificial intelligence itself, and then the scary stuff, artificial general intelligence and super intelligence that's coming forward. But what I said is I was going to talk about it in the sense of films and how films essentially bring out some of those themes, or how AI is used in films. So if you think about Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, that film was using Gen AI, and 25% of the scenes were actually created using Gen AI, saving around $8 million or pounds in production costs. If you think about Ex Machina, right, quite an old film, but it's about an advanced robot that uses deep learning to be able to mimic facial expressions, human facial expressions. A really good example of deep learning. If you think about Blade Runner, the new one, not the good one, but if you think about Joy, the character, which is a holographic character, using machine learning to be able to basically increase their decisioning capability to be able to then influence humans as well. The Creator, a new film out this year, almost completely AI generated, but explores the boundaries between humans and artificial intelligence, and actually looks at it from the perspective of artificial intelligence and how they interact with humans. It's a good film, you should see it. And then if you think about Her, it's an old film, it's a bit weird, very funny, but it thinks about a person who kind of falls in love with their sort of Siri equivalent. There's an interesting phone sex scene in there, but you could watch the film yourself. But it explores the boundaries around how a person can start emulating feelings and really playing onto the human psyche, which could be a good example of artificial general intelligence as it comes out. And then you got the obvious film, Terminator 2. Now, this isn't a classic example of superintelligence, but the T-1000, that's pretty cool, right? And it gives me the opportunity to say, I want your boots, your clothes, and your motorcycle. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through what are those sorts of things as they relate to films. Now, when it comes to the business context, as I said, AI is very exciting, but there are considerations that you need to think about. We are moving, if you take this example of Gen AI, at a very, very fast pace. The tech is really moving in a non-linear fashion, and the advances are huge, but the time between them are very short. And the potential of when these capabilities are launched are not really understood until the time of launch. It's a big reveal, and then you have to work out what to do with them. So therefore, there's a technology overhang between the capability of your firms and the ability to understand the AI and how to leverage the AI. And if the gap grows, you're going to lose. If you can reduce the gap, you've got a huge opportunity to win. That's really important because our surveys for over 3,500 CEOs, 40% of them are saying in 10 years their current business models are going to be defunct, all driven by AI and machine learning. So, what do you need to do when it comes to business implementation? Well, you've got options. You could do one thing, which is one extreme, which is wait and see, have a look around what other people are doing, maybe react and be a bit of a follower, fast follower maybe. You could light experiment, so that's actually using sort of AI to be able to address particular use cases, particular issues you have in your business, and sort of dabble with it, doing MVPs, POCs, and stuff like that. Option 3 is you can actually start developing a large plethora of use cases and collecting those. When Gen AI GPT-4 came out, we looked around our business and within a month created 350 use cases that we are now taking through an MVP POC use case, and some of those have gone into production. Now, in order to achieve that, you've got option 4, which is how the hell do you then implement that, right? It's really quite challenging, especially with the human capital shortages we got, with the knowledge shortages. So you could, for example, start using and setting up a factory capability. So that's really taking those ideas and pushing them into production very, very quickly. Now, you could do that on your own. You could use third parties. You can use anyone to be able to build that, so long as you can get access to that capability. And that then gives you the acceleration piece. Or you can go to full business transformation. Now that is you thinking about, okay, how is this going to impact my business model? What are my new routes to market that are going to be created through AI? Do I literally change my entire marketing function, for example, as it pertains to web because of AI? Optimization for web content can all be done by the machine versus by humans now. So you need to think about those 5 areas and where you want to sit on that. And I think it's important to understand where you do sit, because there's going to be winners and losers depending on your choices. When it comes to those considerations around business implementation, I think that there's 5 no regrets areas of focus. Starting off with that strategic implication, come up with a strategy, understand how AI, by looking around you in the industries, reading reports, YouTube's a good place, and understanding in your industry peers as to what the strategy could be for your AI deployment and your machine learning deployment. And come up and write that down, and then get your board sign-off or your whoever it is, your management co sign-off, to be able to then go and pursue that. And that takes investment as well. It's not going to come for free. So you need to think about the dollar value, how you're actually going to invest and how you're going to get ROI and return on investment out of that. And then you start needing to think about the more deeper implications of this. Are you ready? Are you ready for the infrastructure and data? An example of that is your data in the cloud? Because that will make AI much, much more achievable to integrate. Are you very, very legacy-based in your IT systems? What choices of large language models do you make? A lot of the choices you make in choosing whether you're going to go with GPT or with Google, all of those sorts of things have cost implications. And so you need to think about that in the context of also the governance around your data. What's the implication if there's a data leak? These models potentially open up new holes in your capability. How do you lock those down? And then think about your use cases. Okay, so what are those things that I think that AI, Gen AI, machine learning will solve in my business problems, whether that's productivity, efficiency, whether that's enhancing your business model and taking it to marketplace in a much more efficient way, whether that's penetrating new products and developing new products in a different way. So think about those use cases and then start applying that through that capability and start testing them out. As I mentioned around governance, this stuff can get you fired if you get it wrong. Right? So make sure that you're adhering, especially if you're a regulated entity or if you've got other areas around you that, where you've got external forces, make sure that you've got the right governance in place, whether that's on your data, whether that's on your business model, whether it's on the way that you use technology. And make sure that you have someone responsible for that governance within your firm that's going to take accountability for that. And finally, around people and culture. Well, even though we've seen a democratization of Gen AI as being the fastest adopted technology in the world, there's still a people and culture implication. People are scared about AI. Is it going to take my job? Do I want to play with it? Do I know how to play with it? And what are my implications around skills and learning to be able to adopt that capability? So you need that cultural change as well within your business to be able to adopt AI efficiently. Now, the good news is, if you get these things right, then you get to retire early. And you get to go to Ibiza. And the only 2 decisions that you make when you're sitting on the beach in Salinas is that second bottle of Albarino cold enough to drink yet? And how many hours siesta do I need before I go clubbing to DC 10? So that's the good news. I want you to be in Ibiza. There are, however, other considerations when it comes to how you actually business implement these. And a lot of questions around these sort of topics come up, right? So how do I ensure that I'm not over-reliant on AI and make decisions that are going to make me lose my job or harm my firm or insert other? Over-reliance on information that isn't necessarily verifiable can get you in trouble. From an audit perspective in PwC, the other side of PwC, if we use AI-generated data or insights into an audit, what's the regulator going to think about that, for example? And you also have to be able to explain that capability, whether it's explaining it to your mum or explaining it to the regulator. You have to be able to explain exactly what that means and how you're using it. Otherwise, it could lead to unintended consequences. There's obviously systemic bias. You saw the hallucination of my picture. Obviously, it looks like me, but that type of hallucination can happen, and bias can happen within AI models. And how you unpick those, I think, is really important to think about. We've touched on data and governance, security. Security first is absolutely imperative for this piece. So I think, the reality is on that side of it, you've got to think about the actual sort of governance and controls and capabilities around adopting AI and machine learning. On the other side, you've got pieces around sort of your people. So how do you address skill gap dependencies, and how do you address the training and development of your people to be able to adopt AI? What happens if there is job displacement? We're thinking about the fact that we have to hire graduates into our firm extensively to be able to, train them up and move them forward. What changes with AI? What do graduates feel when they come into the firm? And how are they measuring and leveraging AI in their own productivity? The reality is that there's also intellectual property rights issues, and we're working through that at the moment, and I'm sure we're going to come on to that a little bit later. A lot of this stuff needs to be protected because it can become your core IP. And if you can't protect that from an intellectual property perspective, you may have invested a significant amount of money for nothing. And then I've talked about the reg side of things and also your operational resilience, making sure that you can keep your firm secure. Now, if you get this wrong, this could lead you in a very different place than Ibiza. And I think I will have to say that Wilco, right, this is not because it went bankrupt, but because actually, allegedly, and I need to say that because it's on YouTube, and I read this on the internet, so it's obviously true, that they deployed some sort of level of machine learning into some of their business ops, and that didn't work out so well for them. Now, I read that on Reddit, so it's obviously true. But you don't want to be there. You do not want to be there. So finally, what I want to leave you with are a few thoughts. Make sure you set out a clear AI strategy and that you understand your business model as it pertains to your firm and the industry in which you work. Invest in understanding how AI and machine learning can create you differentiation vis-a-vis your competitors and bridge that gap, the gap that I talked about around adopting it and your business being ready for it. Augment your capability and your capacity from experts. You're not going to be able to do this alone. There are firms, whether it's the technology firms and the hyperscalers, AI niche firms, and obviously companies like PwC, who can help you to navigate this entire environment. But yourself, be a change agent. And the reason why you need to be a change agent is because you want to be at DC10 in Ibiza, and you don't want to be at Wilco. I'm going to leave you with a final thought, which is from Sarah Connor. The unknown future, as the unknown future rolls towards us, I face it for the first time with a sense of hope. Because if a machine, a Terminator, can learn the value of human life, maybe we can too. Thank you very much, and I'll take any questions.
Am I working? I am. Brilliant. Questions, please. I think we've got time for 2, so if they're really quick, then... Are you? Brilliant. Microphone is coming. No, we need because we're live streaming and it'll be available
go all the way around
on the internet. Do you know what? I'm just going to walk over, Rach. I'm doing it. I'm on it.
Hello, I'm Tessa Tucker. I work in PR and marketing, so fully expect to be out of a job in about 10 years, which is why I'm also a parliamentary candidate. So although we're focusing on the private sector here, I'm just wondering whether you see a big gap opening up in terms of private versus public sector, particularly in terms of regulation and governance. We saw Dominic Cummings' evidence at the COVID inquiry saying, they can't even use Teams. So how are we going to expect the public sector to keep pace with the private sector, understanding the restrictions in terms of regulatory and governance compliance?
Yeah. So we discussed this. We were at the hackathon in London with the government agencies, and we discussed that topic exactly. And I'm a regulated firm, heavily regulated. So, we have to have those considerations that are not exactly the same, but they're similar to government agencies. The first thing to do is you have to be able to put a ring fence around your own environment to be able to leverage these technologies versus opening them up by adopting, ChatGPT 4. So what we've done, for example, is built out our Chat PwC, which is a constrained language model, that doesn't allow external data, and it only trains within our environment. So things like that can be done within the government as well, and even between departments within the government, because in case there's bleed. The second thing is that the governments need to adopt technology quicker, and we're working, for example, with a lot of the government agencies to move and migrate to the cloud. Now, you're still going to get governance and controls and operational resilience restrictions on that, but the cloud will enable a whole lot more as you get au fait with putting the security policies around that will enable you to adopt more technology. And the third thing is I think there needs to be a cultural change within those departments and start thinking about how do you adopt those technologies a lot more than what currently exists. But that's my own thought, just in case YouTube replays that.
Thank you, thank you. One more really, really quick question, if there is one. Otherwise, we will... Yeah, we've got one. Can you grab that one, Rach? Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. Absolutely fascinating as a film buff. Your point, I hadn't really thought through about the non-sequential releases of new technology. So ChatGPT 4 becomes 5, becomes 6, becomes 7. You talked about the technology overhang. How does a company avoid a technology overhang when it seems that nobody except ChatGPT themselves knows what's in the next release?
Yeah, so even though the releases, for example, your examples in Gen AI, so in Gen AI, even though the releases are exponential, and 5, when it comes out in March, will be 100 times, have 100 times more training than, on the language model, will be 100 times bigger than 4. So that's quite exponential in that own right. But it doesn't stop you from learning from 3.5 or 4 in that example, and being able to understand how you can leverage that for your business models and imperatives. When 5 comes out, what you need to do is test whether that actually enhances your capabilities or actually doesn't. And there isn't the actual jury's still out on that as to whether adopting more is going to make your use case better. So you need to work that out. And plus, you'll be paying OpenAI a lot more for 5 than you will for 4. So you have to think of it in a commercial lens as well. So that example, I think, around Gen AI means that you can get going, you can get those use cases going, you can test out and also create the business imperative and value and test out whether you can get ROI against that. And then when the new release comes in, you're kind of like, you're a black belt already, so you can then start implementing that a lot easier. With other AI, I think it's the same, right? Once you get used to being able to describe how you implement and leverage AI, and you go through all of the challenging sort of conversations around governance, control, etc., the next one that you deploy will be a lot easier, and the next one more easy. So, thank you.
Thanks, Dom. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for the fast questions as well, everybody. Okay, so moving on, we have Charles Courtney, who is partner at Michelmores. Charlie is a barrister and partner. He focuses on intellectual property and other complex commercial disputes, with particular emphasis on cross-border technology and finance. He's also the Earl of Devon, and independent of his work at Michelmores, owns and operates the Powderham estate, and that's the other side of the river. He takes pride in sustainable heritage and land management. In 2018, Charlie was elected to the House of Lords as a cross-bench hereditary peer, where he champions the interests of Devon and speaks on technology, heritage, agriculture and the environment. Today, Charlie's discussing the environmental considerations that all business leaders should undertake when planning their business transformation to take advantage of artificial intelligence and machine learning. I shall welcome Charlie.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Congratulations to all of you, I think, on the Exist team for putting together such an amazing room full of interesting businesses and such a panel full of interesting speakers. I'm certainly here to learn an awful lot today. I'm going to give you the view from my own perspective. I combine an interesting array of interests as an IP technology litigator. I spent 10 years trying IP cases in California before moving home to Devon. But also I run an ancient business. We're all talking about AI in the future, but obviously the business that I run at Powderham is 600 years old. The job that I do as Earl of Devon is 800 years old. And what I hope to do in terms of talking about AI and sustainability is to give us a little idea as to how we can harness this for our own long-term sustainable future and not, hopefully, be too scared about the implications of all of these large language models. There's obviously been an awful lot of conversation lately, particularly around the AI Safety Summit, about the terrors of AI and the implications for all of us. And I hope the conversation today will allow us to get a little bit more familiar with the issues. I sit as a crossbench hereditary peer in the House of Lords, and we've been wrestling in that context with AI for some time. We had a debate, I think, in July around the implications of AI, and there's been lots of discussion as to how proactive the government should be in regulating this brand new industry or this terrifying new technology, or letting it develop at its own pace within the confines of our existing regulatory structures. And I, for one, particularly as a lawyer who's practiced both here and in the US, I'm actually quite confident that we do have the tools already to manage this. We've dealt with fast developing technologies before. We dealt with the internet appearing in the 90s and the 2000s. And I think if we have some confidence, if we take our time, if we think about it, if we do the research and educate ourselves, that we really can wrestle with this. And that's not just at Westminster level, that's not just in big tech, but that's us in Devon, around Exeter, with our own businesses, with our own commercial infrastructure. I really think we can do this, and therefore I think it's really important that Exist is providing us with this community and this platform to have this conversation. I should also add just one final plug, that the Exeter Chamber of Commerce's Christmas party is happening this evening at Powdram Castle. We have a Christmas light show, and I'm told just to nudge that. If any of you are wanting to go and gather with the Chamber of Commerce, it would be a good way to continue the conversations that are going on today. And there's another interesting element of my work as a sort of heritage purveyor at Powdram, and that is trying to understand that interface between ancient heritage, ancient culture that we have over there, and new technologies. And we've had some really interesting work with Exeter University, who I know are here today, and Plymouth University as well, into understanding quite how you can translate fabric culture. Powdram has some wonderful interiors, some wonderful history, some wonderful books, and how you can digitize that and export it, as it were, to a much broader, more modern audience. In particular, Exeter University has a digital humanities lab, and they are doing remarkable work in taking old digital manuscripts that we have at Powdram and digitizing those and then making them available to a much broader audience. And similarly, Plymouth are doing these remarkable 3D scanning technologies around the interiors, so that you are creating spaces for people in a digital world to explore the physical world of past centuries. And so this interface between our sort of long-standing culture and heritage and all this modern technology is of great interest to me. The focus today, though, of my talk is going to be sustainability. And I'm not just going to talk about the environment. I will talk about all three pillars of sustainability. That is the environment, that's S, social, and G, governance. But I will start with the environment, because obviously that is one of the most crucial issues that we are facing. I lead Michelmores Sustainable Economy Group, and the firm is very much focused upon how to assist clients to their sustainable growth. There is a real combined challenge that society is facing at the moment. There's the challenge of digitization, and there's the challenge of decarbonisation. And the two really do go hand in glove. I cite there Das Gupta. This is the report that was commissioned recently by the Treasury, by Professor Das Gupta, into the economics of biodiversity. And this was, I think, 2018, 2019, and it very much informed our debates around the Agriculture Act and the Environment Act, and the fact that for the last 200-300 years, our Western culture has been on an industrial growth path that has entirely ignored the cost of the natural capital that we've consumed to achieve it. With the digital revolution and with AI, there is potentially a chance that we can reverse that and we can decouple the economic growth of the future from the consumption of our natural capital and the consumption of our planet. It's somewhat ironic that I am sandwiched today between Dom from PwC and Richard from Microsoft, because I'm going to rely heavily upon the joint work of Microsoft and PwC, who have prepared this remarkable report, the use of AI to enable a sustainable future. And it's really a seminal piece of work. They've looked across 4 key sectors to really understand how AI is going to enable us to transform our economy and to decarbonize. And it really is the solution, in their view, to many of the problems that we're facing. The digitization economy and the digital economy generated by AI, they consider to be worth up to $15 trillion, I think, by 2030. It's going to be a vast economy. And obviously, the value of decarbonisation, the value of achieving our net zero goals, I think they estimate to be up to $500 billion per annum once we are at the net zero target. So clearly, these are the huge economic models of our time. The 4 sectors they look at are energy, transport, agriculture, and particularly water. And within each of those sectors, there are so many areas in which AI is going to be instrumental in assisting us to the decarbonisation and the increasing biodiversity that we're expecting. In energy, we're all aware of the use of smart meters, but obviously the introduction of the digital grid will enable us to use our energy in a much more efficient and smart way. We're beginning to see battery storage technology, and I know this is obviously pertinent locally. Clinton Devon, I know, are looking at a battery storage operation in the Otter Valley, not far from here, in East Budley. And that's going to be really important if we are to harness the renewable energy that we are beginning to generate in the southwest. It's really interesting. We at Powdram were looking at some renewable energy work, particularly some solar investment. And of course, the reason it couldn't happen is we simply do not have the grid capacity for some of these projects. And so the speed with which AI can improve the sense and use of our grid, the better, and the greater our capacity for improving our ability to maintain our energy systems and to maintain them for the future. Transport is the second most important sector, and again, we're all probably fairly familiar with autonomous vehicles, but AI will assist incredibly in ride sharing, in use of efficient use of transport, predictive traffic management. Anyone who has to go into Exeter around the roundabout here will appreciate predictive traffic management will be revolutionized by AI. And again, road maintenance. I took about half an hour longer than I expected to get in here this morning, and that is because obviously the roads around Exminster seem to be in a terrible state around Matford, and AI will assist in planning maintenance and ensuring flow of traffic will improve, and that will assist us in so many ways in our transport network. Agriculture is close to my heart. I obviously farm at Powdram, but also I work very closely in Westminster with the Science and Technology in Agriculture group. There is so much to be done in agriculture in order to reach the net zero target that the NFU has set for 2040, and particularly around the technology of soils. And of course, the technology of soils is so complex. It is a data-driven business, and AI will be incredibly important in the determination and understanding of how our soils work, how water works within soils, and how we deal with nutrients and such in that context. AI is already being used in environmental monitoring. AI is very key for pest control and for large-scale land management. We at Michelmores are working with a number of companies who are looking at the use of satellite technology to monitor natural capital on almost a field-by-field basis. I'm working with a group up the Ken Valley, and we're beginning to monitor exactly how the whole of that watershed is working so that you can tell where the biodiverse areas are, where the runoff is happening, and this can all be done with the use of AI. And the other area of huge advance at present is around genetics, the improvement, the resilience of our farmed animals, and particularly our foods, to the increased climate change that we're seeing. So agriculture is going to see a huge impact from AI. I note there that the southwest of England is identified as the natural capital. Certainly the southwest APPG, of which I'm a member, really is focusing upon the southwest as being the area of the country where, with Exeter University, Plymouth University, the Rothamsted Research Institute, there is more agricultural and land management knowledge in this area than almost anywhere else on Earth. The number of climate scientists in and around Exeter is unrivaled almost anywhere on Earth. And that's a real distinction for our region, and it's something that we are, I think we should be incredibly proud of. Finally, water. Obviously, we're all aware of the challenges of water management. Southwest Water is friends of many, enemies of others, but they are incredibly influential and important as to how our land gets managed. Runoff, etc., is incredibly challenging, and one of the biggest issues that we've seen in the House of Lords lately, championed particularly by the Duke of Wellington, is the terrible condition of our rivers. And of course, that will all be assisted with the use of AI as we're understanding leaks and management of water systems using that technology. AI, however, is not a panacea for our environmental challenges. AI also results in a vast amount of computer usage, a vast amount of electronic uses, a vast amount of energy usage. All of the data of which these LLM models are trained has to be stored somewhere. It's got to be stored in vast data centers. The technology around that is incredibly challenging, how you store stuff using less energy. Moving on swiftly to AI and society, the S in ESG. We've already heard about workplace disruption, loss of jobs. That's going to be incredibly challenging for all of us in our respective businesses. IP and human creativity. This is an area we've focused on quite closely in the House of Lords, particularly around the protection of the human creative process. These large language models are largely trained upon vast data sets out on the internet, which consist of copyrighted materials belonging to individual human beings. We've had a battle royal with the government to stop them effectively harvesting that without licensing the technology, and it's incredibly key that we continue to maintain the primacy of the creative human endeavour. Discrimination and divides we've already heard about. There is inherent bias in AI, and we've got to be incredibly cautious of that. In order to decrease that bias, we need to make sure that we're educated, and particularly in rural areas, we need to make sure that people have access to the internet and access to this technology, and therefore the rural broadband rollout is incredibly important. AI can assist us with resilience and climate preparedness, as I've mentioned, and we've also got to be very cautious of Big Brother. If everything is on the cloud, are people watching us? What is our digital identity, and how do we protect that? And finally, just turning to governance, we're all aware of the terrors of Cambridge Analytica. Is our next election going to be decided by a bunch of bots exercised out of Russia? We need to be cautious about that, and we need to be wise about that. Justice. Yesterday, I chaired an AI and legal services conference. Are our parking fines going to be decided by an automated system? Increasingly they are. Is justice going to be determined by an automated system? Ethics, the AI Responsibility Summit you're all aware of. Structures, are corporate structures going to be appropriate going forward, or should we be moving our corporate structures into social enterprises? Is the shareholding the appropriate means of managing our businesses. And finally, just a bit of blue sky thinking. We're all dependent upon gross domestic product, GDP. That's how we manage our growth. But think about Bhutan. They use the gross national happiness quotient. Or in New Zealand, where they have a national well-being budget. All of those can now be evaluated and managed by AI. The ability to really evaluate and collect information and process it in a different way will allow us to evaluate the quality of our lives, hopefully, in a better way for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charlie. Thank you very much. Okay, yes, I am. Questions? Questions from lady in the front. I'll do this one. Yeah, I'll do this one. And just a reminder, short and pithy, please.
I'll try and make it short. Hello, Emily Dale from Coastal Recycling. We help customers reduce their waste and improve their recycling. And it's quite manual because we have to sort of look at the waste coming through and analyse it and send data, photos, everything. AI, I can see, could help on a big scale when all the material comes to a facility and lasers can take images and send reports on the breakdown of that. But in terms of a customer basis, so everyone in this room that throws rubbish away, I saw waste was on your slide. Have you seen anything through those reports that can help improve on recycling, at source?
Yes, I haven't seen anything from the reports, but my knowledge of the waste industry and the way that it's increasingly automating is obviously it's using technology to identify what is where and how to process it. What is also, I think, more interesting around the technology is the advances in the ability to break down and use the waste products as and when they are identified. Because obviously, certainly in the agricultural sphere where I've seen the most development, the idea of insect protein, etc., and using waste products to create forms of protein is going to make a vast difference and is going to improve things, I think, incredibly. We at Powdram have been using Timbridge District Council's garden waste for many years to manage our soils. And one of the challenges with that is you end up with an awful lot of non-organic matter within the soils. And the technologies that gradually are coming, I think, through whoever's handling Timbridge District Council's waste, which I think is you guys. Yeah, I was going to say, you are improving it, and it's been one of our real challenges is how you take that organic waste product and make sure it's clean. And I think it is merely a matter of time for that to get better and better.
Thank you. Thanks, Charlie. One more. Chris in the middle. Rach.
Hello, Chris Fippin. I'm at Exeter University now, which is new for a lot of people in the room. A quick point, because you mentioned the Digital Humanities Lab at Exeter. I thought you might be interested to look at the Vesuvius project as well, which are looking at digitizing old Roman papyri as well, which is a very big project. My question is very simple, actually, is what can we do to make sure that the current and future leadership classes in, for example, Westminster, have the first clue what's going on with any of this?
That's a very good question. It is really important that institutions like yours continue to lobby and to provide opportunity to educate our leadership. It's so terrifying in Westminster how quickly laws are made. I mean, I think everybody's aware that our net zero target for 2050 was debated, I think, over a matter of a couple of hours in the House of Commons. It is the most significant piece of legislation probably for our economy to have been passed in the last 20, 30 years, and yet it just got waved through without barely any attention. Now we're spending our whole time wrestling with how do we achieve that. I'd obviously make a plug for the House of Lords, where things are given a little bit more time and a little bit more debate. It's also really important that you lobby and engage with your local Member of Parliament. Tessa obviously is working hard for the Exeter seat, but it's really important that they get to hear what is really important to the South West, to Exeter. I've mentioned the South West APPG. That is a group of South West MPs who really focus upon the issues that are key, MPs and members of the Lords, focused on local issues. Do engage with that if you get the opportunity, because it does work. People, if you educate your MP, they will do a much better job for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you very much. Right, moving on. We are still on time. I'm so impressed. So moving on, we have Richard Potter, who is the Director of Digital Strategy at Microsoft. He advises business leaders on how to create value through digital transformation and innovation. He was previously Microsoft's Chief Technology Officer for consulting services and has over 20 years of experience. He now empowers organisations and individuals to embrace the opportunities and challenges of technology and to understand impact on business and society. So Richard is going to discuss the duty of care that we all have in the development of responsible artificial intelligence, what we should be considering, and the business value and impact that we can create. Richard?
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. It's lovely to be here. It's fantastic. Can I just say that I'm a Bristol resident. I am utterly invested in the greatness of technology in South West. So anything that I can do while I'm here to help you in a broader sense at all, I would love to get involved in deeper conversations as well. But let's talk about where we are today. And I'm going to give, I suppose my editorial is to share with you a perspective on generative AI, because that is almost everything in my job at the moment, but a perspective based from a company that is absolutely instrumental in developing this technology, but probably more importantly, taking it to market. It is a fundamental part of our business. And that throws up lots of interesting challenges, technically, commercially, but also socially, responsibly, and ethically as well. So that's the big box that I'm opening up in this. I'm going to do it through the art of PowerPoint, naturally, as you'd expect. I'm going to tell a story about transformation in the new era of AI. And I'll begin with a story about a running shoe. A women's running shoe. It's a story that I can't claim a huge amount of credit for. It's a colleague of mine that did a bit of a thought piece. In this world of generative AI, what would it take to do a new product launch inside an organization? And amongst everything, he chose a women's running shoe. So he first threw ChatGPT naked at the internet to review the top 6 reviewed running shoes on the market. Used various prompts inside that interrogation to make sure that he was filtering for the right kinds of review, not spam reviews, but identified the top 6 reviews and then extracted the key attributes of those running shoes that made them the top 6 reviewed running shoes. And then threw them back into generative AI to create the mother of all running shoes. What would happen if you combined all of those attributes into the best of the best running shoe? There are then various other generative AI frills that were conducted using things like DALL-E to create this glorious image that you're seeing here, but also to define what the product would be, what the materials would be, what the cost would be of manufacture. All of this data was then thrown into Microsoft Excel. He ran a co-pilot routine on the side of Microsoft Excel to develop an entire business case for this new product launch. And naturally, as it is a pitch inside a company for a new product launch, he put all of that work into PowerPoint, ran another co-pilot routine, and produced the PowerPoint presentation and pitched it to a metaphorical board. Welcome to the world of generative AI meets productivity. That's where we are. It's a really useful level set of where we are. But a very similar slide to some of the slides that Dom's been using here as well, so I won't indulge us in this. But just let's root ourselves in the fact that we have been on a journey, and the key point behind all of this is that much of this is already familiar to us. So in that spirit of the rise of the machines of Terminator, we are already getting our heads around much of this. We are definitely in a new era with generative AI, and you'll hear many hyperboles in that space. But I think one of the ones that is, those of us that are really running at this hard at the moment would recognize that it is definitely game-changing. It is definitely shifting our way of thinking about fundamentally how this technology is being used. And there's 2 real causes of this big shift with this new generation of technology, which is that we are able to interact with this technology through this much more empathetic, contextualized interface of natural language. It's much different from just speech-to-text conversion or predictive text. This is much more conversational, much more contextual, much more semantic than it's ever been. But there is also a greater mathematical horsepower that's sitting behind this that enables us to make better inferences inside this. So our ability to draw insights from data has also been increased in this as well. And you put those two together, and there's a lovely little analogy that if you're trying to get people to get their heads around what we're talking about here, the gentleman from Exeter University about how do we encourage our politicians to understand the shift that's happening at the moment. Try and think of it in these terms here. And I'll caveat that again, where every time I put this slide up, I'm imagining a whole bunch of data scientists just despairing at the ridiculousness of this. But imagine you're walking down a maze. The traditional AI that we've been used to, we've got our heads around already, would offer you a statistical advantage of turning left and right at any particular junction in that maze. Now imagine if you were able to take a helicopter above that maze and understand that, yes, you could turn left or right at any particular junction, but there would probably be a better left or right if you knew where the ultimate destination was and some of the context of the surroundings in that space. That's what generative pre-trained transformers are now bringing to our capability in this new world of AI. So really big shift in the way that we're using this kind of horsepower. And it's fast. Literally a year ago today, we were probably a week into GPT-3 being launched. Very few of us were probably actually using it then. Some of us were beginning to rock it, doing shitty dad jokes and limericks at dinner parties and things like that. Remember those days? Well, we're still there, I'm sure. But look how fast we are moving in this. And imagine projecting yourselves 12 months ahead from now. All of the creativity, the wrestling of that technology overhang, which, by the way, Dom, I loved. I thought that analogy is so right for where we are at the moment. Think about how we're going to escalate up that ladder of technology overhang over the next 12 months in time. Just a quick piece on Microsoft's perspective. What's a big tech company doing with this product? We brand it as Copilot. That's our product with this. So when we take this technology into what we describe as our software as a service applications, are things like Microsoft Office, are things like Power BI, are things like Dynamics, those applications, those products that we have, we call it Copilot. And it is everywhere. It's out for release. Many of us have been loving this and trying this for a good 9 or 10 months already, and it is utterly transformative in some of the most basic applications that we're using in a productivity environment. But from a Microsoft perspective, expect to see it everywhere. It will be everywhere. There will be a Copilot in every Microsoft application that you will encounter, in whatever level you're doing it. It is fundamental to our business strategy as a product company. But we're also a platform. We're also a platform to help others do great things, to develop their own co-pilots, if you like, in their own environments. And so what we do is we then present that technology through our Azure service, and we put that OpenAI capability through our investment in OpenAI, and then we wrap it in all of the things that we know are important in a robust, governed, responsible, and secure cloud platform. And that's what you're getting with OpenAI, enabling you to do broadly things around limitless generation with very intuitive and very limited input in that interaction. And one of those examples of those things, and I am prompting questions at this point deliberately by putting these things up. For us, our business depends on trust. It commercially depends on trust, not just our responsibility to society. So we are looking to put incredible effort into demonstrating that these platforms are responsible, that we're anticipating and thinking through the risks associated with the impact of this technology on the businesses that we work with, but also the society within which these tools are being used as well. I'm showing you our responsible AI principles. Anybody thinking about embracing this technology in their own right should be building these kind of foundations as well. Principles that are consistent with your own values, your own perspectives as well. So what are we doing with this technology? What are some of the things that I'm doing with my customers on a day-to-day basis? They generally fit in terms of 4 camps here, how this technology is being used. A lot of it for content generation. It's amazing at summarization. I'll show you a couple of examples of those in a minute. People are using this technology readily to code. About 2/3 of the code that is being generated on some of our platforms like GitHub and Visual Studio is now being augmented by co-pilots inside the code development thing. Democratizing coding, if you like, meaning that you don't have to become a deep Python expert. You can program in Python using natural language and develop and debug and test that code using this kind of technology. You're seeing this in search, you're seeing this in the conversational chatbot experience that Bing has now transformed itself into as well, but we're also putting those search tools inside your enterprises as well. So your internal search on your intranets and your SharePoints and things like that are now being powered by that contextual natural language experience that we love in this technology. But those are the discrete applications of this. Imagine what happens when you start putting all of this together. And more importantly, imagine what starts happening when you start putting generative AI together with all of those traditional forms of AI and data science more generally. Because the reality of these applications that you're developing is they are what's known as multimodal. You are very rarely going to be using naked ChatGPT or Gemini or Llama or whatever. You're not going to be using a foundational model just as an application. You're going to be wrapping it with other components in there. And those other components provide the opportunity for greater value, but importantly also the opportunity for control and restriction and application in those. Another area, another surface for you to think about how you're going to resolve many of the challenges associated with this technology. We are running at this as organizations, as human beings. It's incredibly intuitive. It delivers value very quickly. There are many metrics that we can use to substantiate these arguments as well. But I'm slightly breathlessly going to run us into the meat of what I want to talk about here, which is what does this look like in real life? And I've taken some of those example use cases and I've put together a few videos. A slight bit of trepidation, a conversation I had with Alex about whether these videos are going to play with audio and everything like that. If it doesn't, it's on PowerPoint. It's on me, okay? So there we go, Alex, I put that. So the first one, this is product summarization. You're seeing this already in much of your e-commerce experience. You're seeing this, shall I say, on Amazon as well, where your reviews are being summarized and presented to you. Here's one of our customers, a car retail company, selling second-hand cars, wanting to give their customers the best experience from some of the reviews of their products. Beautiful. Never in
Car
doubt.
buying is a big decision. It's the second largest thing a person will do after buying a home. CarMax disrupted the industry by bringing honesty and transparency. We have tens of thousands of cars on our website or through our app. And without talking to a human being, customers can get overwhelmed.
The challenge that we had was that we only could create so much content. There's manual effort, there's research, the writing, there's the proofreading.
Our writers can only produce so much content a month. It would have taken them years to produce enough pages to be relevant.
Azure OpenAI service allows us to summarize all of the custom reviews and put it in a simple to read and understandable sentence.
We're able to take content and feedback from a lot of other customers, curate it, and create this very tailored content for a specific car.
Through the fine-tuning process, we're at 80% of the content goes through without a human needing to be involved. We're estimating an individual would take 11 years to do what OpenAI service has done in days. We have seen a significant increase in our search engine optimization.
Now, the editorial team, they're able to focus their time on the areas most beneficial to the company and to our customers. There's so much possibility with OpenAI service. We're innovating at a scale, at a pace like never before. It's going to change everything we do.
Brilliant. So some really important features in there about the real demonstrable value in this so that you can count the impact of productivity, but also the offloading of work to enable people to do new things, new forms of added value inside your organization. Hold on to those. Other forms of impact that you're seeing in terms of this, so these interactions, the chatbots in our retail experiences now, they're all rapidly becoming infused with AI. So the context of the conversation, in this case it's Carrefour, so what you're seeing is a French chatbot, but what you're doing is that you're understanding the context within which a menu is being built for an evening meal, and then being able to offer that with the product descriptions that are on that e-commerce site and infusing it with some of the customer data that's sitting in the customer data platform underneath to make it an incredibly hyper-personalized experience. All of these kinds of interactions are just running at us now. They're the low-hanging fruit, if you like, of the applications in our world at the moment. The next thing is really pushing on into content generation. And just a quick anecdote about this one here. I was at a marketing conference in London a couple of months ago now, 500 marketeers in the audience, and their job is to create lavish retail experiences online, like this example here. This is a hypothetical example, I should caveat that, but the context here is that imagine a customer going into a travel retail site, and they go in very open-minded at the beginning of what we would describe as a decision tree. You turn up at the website and you say, I want to go on holiday, I've no idea where I want to go, can you help me? And the decision tree guides them through a series of decisions. Do you want to go somewhere hot? Do you want to go somewhere cold? Is it an active holiday, or do you want to sit on the beach? Is it just you, or is it the family? And it's guiding you through a series of pages that offer you copy and imagery, helping to steer you towards a choice that's right for you, but also a choice that maximizes the commercial impact for that retailer as well. It's infused by the customer data as well, so it is got a degree of personalization in that experience. And this audience that I'm talking to, their job is to create beautiful experiences like this. They're very proud of what they're guiding customers through in this. Each of those decision trees are made manually, generally. There's some little tweaks that are done automated in that space. They do things like A/B testing using these websites. So 80% of the traffic might see the standard experience, but they're probably also testing 20% of the traffic on a new decision tree that they're also building. They're wondering whether that's going to be more effective than the 80% one. The reason why it's called A/B testing is basically because that's the limit of the time that they can spend on it. They can spend two. They can spend the time to build two. You can see where I'm going with this. My demo basically automated everything. None of the content in the decision tree was pre-built at all. The copy, the imagery was generated on the fly using Azure OpenAI service. It was personalized, hyper-personalized, depending on the dynamics of the customer interaction, where they were, what their history was, the trends that were on social media, on TikTok that day. Incredibly dynamic. I'll just run some of this through for you because there's a little flourish at the end of it. As we went through this demo and we got onto the final bit, with a slight bit of trepidation, I threw it open to the audience for a bit of improvisation on this, and I said, where should we go? And some smart aleck on row 5 said, Mars. So we ran it with Mars. And this is what a hiking holiday in Mars is going to look like. Let me just settle the room here. We then didn't do A/B testing. Of course, we did A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I testing because it's easy to do as many of these versions as possible once you're automating it. The room is now looking at each other thinking, crikey, that's my job. Presumably that's your departure to politics. But then very quickly, they're settling and they're thinking, actually, I didn't really enjoy writing all that copy. It was a bit of a dull job for me. I'm getting vast amounts of insight now about my customer. I'm building these incredibly hyper-personalized, dynamic, real-time retail experiences. And yes, there's a constituency that are uncomfortable with that shift, but there's a huge amount of energy in that room about thinking about the opportunity, and you're beginning to see that shift. I'm going to wrap it up at that point there. Thank you so much for letting me talk about this subject.
Okay, I think we've probably got time for one question, but what I was going to say is if people have questions, more questions for any of our speakers, do come and find us afterwards, and we can do things then. Rach, gentleman there with glasses and grey jacket.
Hi there, thank you, really, really insightful. I'm not sure I'm allowed to mention Google, but I will, apologies. The penalising of AI content versus human creative, what's Microsoft's stance? Because ultimately, and I look at the Hollywood writers' recent strike, human creativity versus AI, are we going to either embrace it, or do you think we're going to hold it back?
Yeah, so let me start first with approach all of this with an immense amount of humility. This is a fast-moving technology field. Anybody that stands up in front of you and says that they're utterly, entirely confident about their ability to be able to nail all of that is probably a little bit misguided, and we would never approach it from that side of things. However, let me refer back to one of those analogies that I talked about. Remember that when you're deploying these in a rigorous enterprise commercial environment, it is not standalone foundation model that you're going to be exposing the public to. So you're wrapping that with some of the platform features that we would have in our Azure service, which provides you with a lot of the limitation of where you're going to be applying that. And then imagine that you're also putting a UX and a UI experience on top of that that is actually going to be limiting the context within which that is being used, allowing you to put lots of caveats and lots of conditions associated with the use of this kind of content that's being in there. And then the final thing I would add to that as well is that from a commercial point of view, Microsoft is incredibly exercised about making sure that there is a reduced risk on any consumer of this service, because we want you to use this service. So you'll find that when you're using our Copilot service, so anything that was within the Copilot experience on our software as a service applications in Microsoft, it comes with a Copilot commitment now. And that is Microsoft's commitment to say that we would support you in any indemnity action that happens as associated with the content that is developed through that service. Now, we're very careful in terms of how we define that clearly, obviously, but it is a reflection of how serious companies like Microsoft take that and want to make sure that we develop the rigor to stay on the right side of the line of your question, effectively.
Thank you.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on, we have Michelle Beeger, who's a software engineer at Digilab. Michelle's my former colleague, software engineer and a deep thinker. Digilab is a machine learning SaaS company based up out in Exeter on the Quay. Michelle has experience working at the Institute of Physics in London as a team coordinator and also within her research group at the University of Exeter, which is where she's done her PhD. Michelle will be considering some of the questions around ethics when organisations use AI and machine learning, what actions could and should be implemented to improve outcomes. Okay.
Hi, so given that biography, you're probably wondering how I came onto the topic of AI ethics, and the answer is that through my PhD, I teach at the university, and all of a sudden in spring, I kept seeing the same internet browser page open. No prizes for winning what it was, it's ChatGPT. Students are using it all the time. And through exploring what ChatGPT and AI meant for pedagogy, that's sort of how I fell into learning a lot about AI ethics and working with AI ethics. So first things first, we've spoken a lot about how AI can do good for the environment, but there's also an environmental cost associated with AI. Anyone who's aware of the climate crisis might be familiar with this graph, where we're seeing that the amount of carbon budget we have to thrive as a species on this planet is shrinking every day. And training AI models takes up a significant portion of that cost. And it's not just the carbon costs that we need to consider when we're training AI models, it's also water. The cloud is a real place. It's a physical location of data centers that hold computers. And when companies create these data centers, it requires vast amounts of water resources that take away resources from the local residents. And we've seen this happening in Uruguay particularly, in one of the harshest droughts of the past couple years, and as well in some American states as well. And so, as we've mentioned throughout today, and also just now, data is what makes AI spin. It makes it happen. And so I'll be returning to the theme of data quite often during my talk, and you'll see in the top right-hand corner we have kind of three concepts when it comes to thinking about data being used ethically in AI models. And those three kind of core pillars are consent, notice, and regulatory obligation. And so sticking with the theme of generative AI, shadow libraries have kind of formed a large part of the training data sets as some of the most significant data LLMs out there currently. And these shadow libraries are PDFs of books that have been taken without the consent of the author, and also without given due notice. And so that is a regulatory kind of obstacle that's being fought about right now in the United States. So it's good to keep a firm eye on that, as that will kind of, whatever outcome that happens there with these lawsuits, will make a significant impact on the businesses that use these LLMs. We also want to consider that a large part of these training data sets are also the internet, which begs the question, what is the internet? And unfortunately, the internet reflects quite a few biases that we have in our society. So for example, there's quite a large gender bias on the internet. We see that less than 15% of Wikipedia contributors, for example, are women. And across the board, across social medias, we see that women make up the smallest voice on the internet. There's also a significant language bias in that a lot of the internet is in English, which means that we're missing out on other languages and other cultures in our training data sets. We also have the problem of training our data, essentially. And so for our training data, we need to make sure that that data is clean and labeled. And the reason why you need this is that currently there's very limited semantic understanding of these models. These models so far are mostly statistical representations of the data that's in the training data set. And so when a user says to an LLM, please, can I have this output? Can you make me a recipe for a delicious banana pie? Your social media company that's returning that output to you does not want to return harmful output, doesn't want to give you a banana pie recipe that's going to make you ill. And so in order to clean through the data that we have in our training data set and get you an answer that is not going to be harmful, often these larger companies outsource this work to data companies. And unfortunately, historically, we've seen that these data companies rely on laborers in Africa and Southeast Asia. These workers go through labeling the data of the internet. And this involves a lot of traumatic work because, as you can imagine, the worst of the internet, going through that is quite traumatic. A lot of these workers have PTSD. A lot of them weren't properly told what the work was, weren't given support, and are incredibly underpaid. But this labeled data goes back to our AI tools and means that we can have LLMs that give output that is appropriate. But there are alternatives. There are some companies that are working on trying to get this right. This is just one example. And these companies make ethical data pledges that are good inspiration to take for going forward if you are a company that is looking to use training data or AI models. And in their model, what they do is they work on the ground with local organizations to find workers. And these workers are then paid a living wage. But significantly as well, this corporation, as they sell on to other corporations the data that these workers have cleaned and labeled, these workers continue receiving commission for their work. So we're closing the loop and providing de facto ownership of the data that these workers have cleaned. So that's just one example of how we can move forward a little bit more ethically. Another thing that I would like to talk about, so we've mentioned so far bias within training data, but of course there can also be bias in our models themselves. And so looking at an example of this, we go to the United States, where there was a study where a state had implemented an AI model to assess the needs, the health needs of the population. And what ended up happening is that because Black patients were assigned the same level of risk by the algorithm, despite being more ill than white patients. And so this ended up reducing the number of Black patients who were identified as needing more care by over half by the model. And this bias ended up being introduced because the AI model used healthcare costs as a proxy for the health needs. And so, but this already reflects a bias that was already present in the system. So we're seeing biases that are already present in a system being automated. And this can be helped in part by explainable AI, which is thankfully becoming more and more popular. But explainable AI isn't the only thing that we need to think about. We need to make sure that explainability comes with actionable recourse. That means not over-relying on AI models and allowing space in the system for human input to continue to correct or alter AI-generated output. And so we see an example of that, again, in the healthcare system, in a patient called Tammy Dobbs, who's diagnosed with cerebral palsy, again in the United States. And in her state, they had automated the admin required to assess a patient for how many hours of need they require. She requires about 56 hours of care a week, but once the state had automated this system in an attempt to reduce the admin, this was changed to 32 hours, despite the fact that there was no change in her circumstance, and despite the fact that all of her attending nurses agreed that she needed to go back to these 56 hours. And it ended up requiring legal procedures in order to change this. So we really need to allow space in our systems to identify and address potential errors. And so we're coming back to our data and privacy concerns. And so as I mentioned, consent, notice, and regulatory obligation are kind of the three pillars that we need to consider because so much of our AI models revolve around data. And so to kind of clarify the difference between data and privacy and how important it is in AI models, we can consider, when we think of data used with AI models, we think of how a company collects or uses AI data for training, the marketing and advertising consumer behavior data that's used, and also the data outputs. And then on the privacy side, we have how we interact with a company's products or services, and the visibility of your interactions with a company's products or services. And so in the middle, how this comes together with AI models is how your consumer or personal data is being collected and bartered between companies and governments. And we see this play out in real time with some of the products that are out there. So some of you may be familiar with a Roomba. It's an automatic Hoover. It has a little dock in your home, and while you're out, it hoovers for you. And in order to hoover around your space, it needs to know what your space looks like. And so what it does, it creates a virtual layout of your house as it goes, and it also takes photos of your house. And it does these photos so that, again, it can send it to outsourced workers who then can say, oh, actually, there's a corner here, so that next time your Roomba doesn't drive into the same corner every time. And with these, again, this theme of outsourced work, these workers can and do post these pictures online in unsecured company and also social media servers. So there ended up being a case of a woman who had owned a Roomba whose photo of her being semi-nude in the bathroom ended up online. And so this is a scenario where we have little informed consent. Yes, you signed the privacy policy, but let's be real, who actually reads those? And that is to some degree a design, right? They're meant to be obfuscating. And then we also have the issue of notice. When this woman's privacy was violated, was she given proper notice? And then, of course, regulatory obligation. What obligations do these companies have in regards to this data and privacy? And so our so what page, this is a collection of kind of terrible slides, but how can we continue to use AI ethically? I think these kind of are our starting points here. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that we're establishing our values as a business and proactively interrogating what use cases your AI models are addressing that might challenge those values. And that kind of goes in line earlier with what Dominic said, again, about thinking carefully about what your business stands for and how your AI models are either going to further that or not further it. We can also start considering the use of ethics boards or committees within a company when discussing using AI models, like in medicine. And also making sure that we're leading with solutions that center humans and humanity and leaving room for accountability. Making sure that we do have actionable recourse and that we don't just point a finger and say, oh, it was the model's fault. Because that isn't acceptable when people's lives, privacy, healthcare are on the line. And finally, making sure that we're seeking out inclusivity and centering diversity in machine learning teams. The more voices that you have at the table mean that you have more points of view that might be able to call out when you have scenarios where you have bias in your model or in your training data. Additionally, I would mention staying informed. Because regulation is so often behind technology, journalists tend to be kind of the first to interrogate biases and abuses. I have some recommendations here listed, but yeah, generally just stay informed. And yeah, I'd love to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Michelle. That's great. I managed to miss the break because I'm so concentrating on time.
I was wondering about that. I was pretty sure I thought through a break.
We'll have that in a minute. 5 minutes. We'll do 5 minutes of questions and then we'll take a break, which is actually bang on time for when we're supposed to be taking a break anyway, so it was all planned, obviously. So questions. Who has questions for Michelle? I suspect many people. I'll head this way. Here you go, sir.
Thank you. I'm Andrew Ellis, I2I Digital. What happened, you know the old adage, garbage in, garbage out?
Oh, I love that adage, yes.
So, all these machines are going to the internet and finding content and regurgitating it. Mm-hmm. ChatGPT is actually dumber now than it was when it first started. So where's it all going to end up in this sort of homogenized mess of stuff that everybody's looking at and thinking, I'm sure I've read that somewhere before?
Yeah, this was actually one of my first concerns, because like I said, I started out looking at this issue from the issue of like pedagogy, and I know my students don't believe this, but I don't want to read the same essay, even if it is a first. It's not fun for anyone. Yeah, so yes, I totally hear that concern, and I think actually what we're going to start seeing is more garden walls being put up. I think I hope actually that this is going to happen, that people start recognizing the value of a unique creative voice and start paying for that value. So if you have a magazine that says, we don't accept AI generated content, then I think we're going to start seeing more and more people actually paying for that, and going back to this garden walled kind of environment, as opposed to like the beginning of the internet where everything was free and open. I think we're going to see more people happier to pay subscriptions. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Next question. There's got to be more. Charles has one.
Michelle, that's really interesting. As I mentioned in my talk, that there's real concern around the licensing and the copyright theft that's inherent in LLM models. I was out in California for Thanksgiving last week and noticed that IBM is advertising their large language model as being one that is entirely licensed, and the content that has trained it is validated and auditable. And I wonder if you're seeing within the industry that some players are beginning to really to establish their credentials by ensuring that their input is all legal and regulated.
Yeah, I think thankfully we're starting to see more of it. So I know, for example, Hugging Face is like a very big pro-ethical AI model, and they're getting more and more traction. I'm seeing some significant academics. One of them I lifted on here, Ruman Chaudhary. She's now part of a board of a new company that's doing ethical AI. I just saw this news this morning, so I don't know what it pertains to, but I think we are getting to see more traction on this, because I think people are very aware of like you mentioned, like the information homogeny that we're going to see, and also the fact that generative AI is particularly harmful to women and children. So So thankfully, yes.
Thanks, Michelle. One more? I think we've got time for one more. Thanks, Rach.
This question is for me, Adrian Brown. Sorry. As an author, you can put a book out there. People can read it. As an author, you're writing creativity. You might be introducing something new. So when we are judging the quality of data, what can we do, or how can we start to go, yes, this is a new idea. It might have not got the evidence to support it yet, but it's a creative idea, and this is an old historic idea, going back to the Powder and Castle issues. You know, how do you balance new versus old and prevent old becoming dominant and new getting squashed?
Because of generative AI coming on. I see. I think in kind of related to what I was saying earlier about like subscriptions and creating a bit more garden-walled environments, I think the people who, providing a space for these people who care about new creativity that comes solely from a human and allowing them the space to come together and like an enabling kind of a space for them to have that. And then making sure that like the old guard of like whatever, for example, say in the publishing industry, making sure that the publishing industry understand that that is what people want, and making sure that these spaces get filtered upwards to these, to the old guard, the people in charge of these industries. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to release everybody for a break. Bang on time. So we've got a 15-minute break. If you could start making your way back in 13 minutes so we can get everybody seated again, I'd be really happy. Thank you. Right. Okay, we are back in the room. Thank you very much. So next up is Tom Meyer, Director... Morgan, hang on. Have I got the wrong bit of paper? Tom Morgan, he's on the top of the paper, not the bottom of the paper. There's too many Toms and Doms and Jameses today. Right, Tom Morgan, who is not the director at Personio, but he is the MD at C-Suite Fundamental and the former partner at Accenture. He's advised many of the world's largest brands on business transformation and the adoption of game-changing technologies. And during his time at Accenture, Tom held P&L responsibility and managed large delivery and sales teams, as well as hands-on delivery of multi-million-pound projects and complex global technology programs. Today, Tom is going to share an example of what to do when things go wrong, which I think is really useful, how to deal with the fallout of bad decisions, and how to recover business credibility and brand equity. Thanks, Tom.
Wonderful, thank you very much. I think James was just saying we have 100 people in the room, so it's wonderful to have everyone back in their seats as well. So I started my career almost 30 years ago with a company, a formidable business called Anderson Consulting in those days, and that later became Accenture, and I spent a number of years with them before joining a much, much smaller boutique business, which was an early adopter of data science, using data science for modernizing traditional data center environments for the acceleration of moving those environments into public and multi-cloud. And my role there was to scale and ultimately to help sell that business, which very fortunately we sold just before the pandemic hit to a big American company called DXC Technology, the former CSC. And that finally gave me the headroom to set up C-Suite Fundamental, which is all about now working with innovative, predominantly but not exclusively tech startups, and leveraging the network that I've been fortunate enough to build over the years to really do hands-on selling for those companies. There's a bit more to it than that, but we'll come on to it. So the idea is that if we get the sales going, I can help them attract the investment that they need, and then off they go. So since we're already eating the mince pies, a Christmas fairy tale in the context of AI and machine learning. So I'm going to start off by talking about one of the firms that was established, that I've been working with very closely, established at the beginning of the pandemic, and they are called still, the story will become clearer, they are called Face Donate, and essentially a revolution in giving, and set up by two exceptionally talented PhD students in London, overseas students. And really, at the core of what they were interested in, at the beginning of the pandemic, the plight of homelessness, was thinking about what is it in us that makes us give generously to people in need, and what is it that perhaps prevents us from being even more generous. And this was long in advance of any of the very sad Captain Tom fiasco that we've learned about. So at the core of their mission, if you like, was this notion of transparency equals trust. And when I got involved, when I said help them selling, a lot of the work I do is first of all looking at the value proposition and working out what is that critical need, the critical problem that the value proposition will address. And it soon became evident that in the whole area of food poverty, and very specifically in the area of food banks, there was a critical problem that we knew this platform could address very well. So it's just an example. It was what I do is to look for that use case, and then it brings the story to life so that I can then turn back into the corporate world and sell that story more easily. So think more broadly than just food poverty. If you think for a moment of how the food banks work, essentially they're replicating very sophisticated supply chain logistics that the likes of Tesco and Sainsbury's have refined over the years. And there is inefficiency in that. They're moving food around in lorries, they're packing it, they're unpacking it, they're having to warehouse that food. And if you're a food bank, you tend to be in an inner city location. It's expensive. energy costs are going up, refrigeration is a costly thing nowadays, but it's also impossible, or very difficult, to provide fresh and healthy food for people that need help with food banks. And it's certainly almost impossible to cater for diversity. If you're thinking about halal or kosher or any of the diversity groups, they're not catered for very well. So that's the problem that we're going to address. And I'm going to play, hopefully, a short video that will explain the story.
My name is Johan, and I am the distribution center supervisor for Hackney Food Bank. Face Donate is a system where people, instead of getting the parcel of food, they can set up an account and get credit allocated to that account. They can take to one of the few shops we work with around Hackney and buy the things that they want.
Food Bank, it's limited into what we can give. Face Donate is good in that sense because they can get their fresh meat, fresh fish, they can get their fresh veg. It gives people that independence.
It really helps us on all sorts of levels. We need paid staff, we need lots of volunteers, we need people to manage those volunteers. It's a big operation. Face Donate can really cut down on those costs, deliver services to the entire community, and make us much more efficient.
I think the project's fantastic. People that are using it are loving it.
Well, I think corporations are really changing now. They have their corporate social responsibility, and Face Donate provides this online real-time reporting, and it engages more of the workforce. I think we need London businesses to support Face Donate right now because food banks are really up against it.
Wonderful. So that was Pat, and I was fortunate to be introduced. So Pat runs Hackney Food Bank, which I believe is still the biggest of the Trussell Trust food banks in London. So we've had great support from them to explain and perhaps dispel one of the early myths about food banks. People don't simply wake up one morning and decide they're going to pop along to the food bank for some free food. There is a very rigorous validation process that goes on before they become eligible to use the food bank. We don't get involved in that first validation step. These are the local authorities and other authorities that do that. The first step we get involved in is when the eligible visitor turns up, they have the choice to get a traditional food parcel, or to register on the system. And to do that, we thought, or the founders thought about the guiding principle of restoring dignity and agency to people who need food banks. And the first step is they simply register by taking a selfie, and they're on the system. They don't need a traditional name and address. Some people don't have a fixed address, so we wanted to get away from that altogether. And armed with their smartphones, they can then go to one of the participating retailers, and we're extremely grateful to the likes of Nisa, who have been very supportive. We're talking to some of the really big chains as well. But the beauty is we've also got the local economy, the market vendors who enjoy the additional footfall of people coming to their stands because there's no heavy infrastructure on the back end of this, or not in the hand at least, in the cloud perhaps. And you've got to think, people that use food banks, the increasing use of that, people are holding down jobs as well as needing to visit a food bank. So you can't simply up sticks, go to the food bank, or if you've got children with you, there are single parents who might need to go to the food bank with pushing a pram. Taking a family food parcel of 20 kilos with you is not that easy. So now they can simply go to any of these participating retailers at a time they choose and select healthy products that they want. And when they get near the checkout, it's a very dignified experience. They simply look into their phone again, and a time-limited QR code, a highly secure QR code, is generated with which they pay at the checkout. and it looks like you're using Google Pay or you've got your credit card on your phone, which many of us have nowadays. Now, for that process to be as simple as it is on the surface, there's a lot of clever stuff that goes on in the background. So, for example, the retailers are reimbursed at the end of the trading day, and they're reimbursed for under 18s goods only. That was stipulated by the food bank. So there's no cigarettes or alcohol. If the retailer chooses to sell those products, they're simply not reimbursed, so it doesn't happen. And you can imagine, as we get increasing users, more and more food banks are now coming on board in East London, we're having to read through those receipts and then reimburse accurately. So there's a lot of big data that's being read in the background. Similarly, the way that we manage fraud, because we want to establish trust, is we've got huge volumes of data and we're looking for anomalies in those patterns of data to help us detect if there are any strange things going on. Unfortunately, there aren't. It's a very secure system. Retailers love it because traditional paper-based vouchers, not very dignifying, but also they are subject to fraud, unfortunately. The data, the other use of the data that we get helps us dispel yet another populist myth about food banks. We don't really care if people were to do the following, but if people went out and spent the money on chocolate cakes and crisps and what have you, that's a whole separate discussion. But the data tells the true story. People are making much healthier choices using the platform than they could ever get hold of in the traditional food parcel. So they're buying fresh fruit and veg. And in the bottom right-hand pie chart there, we're also able to see through that anonymized data that people are able to access halal kosher. So we're able to cater now for the diversity groups. From a cost savings perspective, this is really powerful as well. So on the left-hand side, that red column, admittedly, that is the fully burdened cost, so it's a little bit full fat there. But for delivering a 20-kilo family food parcel, food banks have to buy the food, so they don't survive just off donations, and I don't want to put anyone off providing those physical donations, but it's not the most efficient way for a food bank to then have to collect and hand that food out. So the cost of delivering a 20-kilo family food parcel can be as much as £90. If you move even to an extremely conservative calculation of the business case, which we do, and there's a very good reason why we do that, we're able to demonstrate, and the food bank is able to demonstrate, a saving of almost 25% on every food parcel that is put into the hand of the recipients. Why that's so important? Many people who are visiting the food banks need other kinds of help to get them away from using the food bank, whether it's a mental health issue or other issues that they've got going on, that we can divert the resources and actually spend that money more wisely. Now, from a corporate perspective, this is where I get particularly excited. We like to think of this as the modern just giving. Rather than give and forget, this is give and receive real-time feedback on your social impact. So, as we've heard today, this is focused. There's a little bit of the E in ESG because hopefully we can take some lorries off the road as well. But the main focus is the S in ESG. We're getting that real-time feedback. So the way that works, again, just picking up my phone, if I'm an employee, and employees really do care about this. I started work 30 years ago, but there were different values back then. People, the new talent pool really cares about what their employer gets behind. And so we're talking about food poverty here, but this could be any worthy cause. The platform is very versatile. It's just the use case of food poverty. I can now give my £5 or whatever it is as an employee, and at corporate level, the dashboard can then apply and control the match funding, can apply the gift aid, and then there's automated real-time feedback that comes back to the phone. And that's very powerful because then the employee can choose to give again, and we've got a virtuous circle going on. For the employee, it's great because they're getting social media ready feedback that they can post, and it's certainly more engaging than just a stodgy PDF file that gets updated once a year around CSR. Now, everything was going really well. We had the press getting in touch. The fairy tale takes a bit of a dark twist here. we got a call from Reuters and we got excited. We showed them how the platform worked, and we took them around the food bank. We woke up the next morning, and unfortunately The Guardian then also picked up on it. And Silky Carlo, who's an important champion of Big Brother Watch, unfortunately then wrote to the chief executive of the food bank and said, you must stop using this platform. You are taking vulnerable people's identity and they're having to trade it in return for food. And one of the articles went on to say it could end up in the hands of the Taliban. Now, just to explain how this works, when I use my fingerprint to access my phone or I look at my laptop, that's not facial recognition. We're simply using the nodes around the face. Those nodal points and the distances between them cannot be reconstituted into the image of the face. So fortunately, I'm very proud. One of my other clients that I did some work for a while ago is Principia Advisory. You may have heard of them because they're sorting out some of the unethical issues that have been going on at the CBI. And I had some invaluable advice from them, which I'm going to wrap up with now as I'm running out of time. But one of the powerful bits of advice was at every point in that design stage, bake in the reasons why you're using modern technology. And think about the ethical principles. We were trying to think about restoring agency and dignity to the people who were using the food bank, and we wanted to use that selfie technology for that purpose, to get the anonymity in there. So it's not facial recognition. Document those reasons and publish them on the website. The platitude of perception is reality, unfortunately, in abundance. And seek advice from companies like Principia. They work with the biggest tech companies on the planet, with the big banks, and it's certainly cheaper than having to use lawyers, which we did in the end, or to take out some of the functionality, which now, unfortunately, we've had to do, is take out that cool selfie functionality and put in slightly clunkier two-factor authentication, which is not that easy for everyone to use. My final point, and unfortunately, dear Shane McGowan passed away since I wrote this slide, but in his magical fairy tale for Christmas, also a happy ending for us, I hope, because right now, today actually, some very kind and generous people in London are making a decision now on a significant investment into the platform. So it will have a different name, slightly different functionality, but that's not the last you've heard of this great use of machine learning and AI to help people in need.
Thank you, Tom. That's great. Right. Okay, some questions, please. Who do we have? Everybody's too filled with mince pies and cookies and coffee. Anything from anybody?
I do have a question.
Oh, and I spotted one over there as well. I'll go to the first one.
Tom, they obviously talk about data protection being the key issue here, as well as the facial recognition. Is the platform also tracking people's buying practices, buying habits? Is that informing the retailers? Is there any sort of transaction between the retailers and the platform whereby they know what they need to stock? But because there are so many data points that are coming out of that are valuable and transparently can be used for the benefit both of the people needing the food bank and for the retailers who are supporting it.
It's a great question. I mean, clearly there's a huge amount of data there, but we are now, as you can imagine, quite sensitized because of that false perception of what is believed to have been facial recognition, which it really isn't. So the data is there, but one has to be extremely careful about how that currently it doesn't go back to the retailers in any way, but clearly there could be beneficial reasons for doing so. The main thing that we should emphasize here, it's anonymized. We don't have access to anyone because remember when they're logging on, they're not having to enter a name or address. They can choose to simply give themselves a nickname or an emoji or whatever they want. That was one of the design principles right from the outset to introduce that layer of anonymity. So there would never be a link back to the individual anyway. That's important.
How do you validate the need at the outset? Is that something that needs to be done or can anyone?
Well, depending on which food bank we've been working with, some of the food banks have come up with categories of who needs the help, and there might be health issues or accessibility issues that some of them are facing. But we don't get involved in any of the eligibility, any of the testing of who is allowed to use the food bank. That is done very well by the local, or several types of authorities in the local areas.
Thanks, Tom. There was another question. I saw a hand go up, I think. I did. Yes, I did. I thought so.
Gary Smith from Optimising IT. I'm interested, obviously you spent a lot of time fixing a problem that, you know, in some ways probably shouldn't be there.
Yep.
Have you thought about how that might be applied to the wider context of fixing the fundamental problems around why food banks exist in the first place?
Absolutely. I mean, there's, you know, the whole idea, particularly if you talk to the people that have helped us at the Trussell Trust, and you look at that, I mean, what they're trying to do is actually not exist themselves. So, you know, it starts with the thing that I mentioned on that business case, if you like, or the benefits case, is by making it more efficient, how can we get help to the people that need it, particularly around mental health, which is a big issue for people using the food bank. So, you know, how do they get themselves into those difficulties? And I don't want to turn this into a political discussion by any means, but yeah, I mean, fundamentally, all I can say is the idea is that people don't need to use the food banks at all in the first place. I mean, there's at governmental level, there has been an apolitical, so a cross-party discussion, for instance, around using what they call a cash-first approach. This is not cash. This is not cash being given to individuals in any way. So I think there is, at the moment, and again, it's across the political spectrum, a view on why are we in this situation with a massive rise in the need for food banks at the moment. And I think there are a number of issues that feed into that. What we've seen is that this is something that can actually help address the fundamental issues if it's understood and used in the right way. But certainly from the demand that we're now seeing, and this is just one use case, you know, this is from the demand that we've now seen, it's exceptional. Which is a sad state of affairs.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Okay, moving back onto Tom Meyer, who is the director at Personio. He is also former principal software engineer at Meta, and I suspect most people in the room know who Meta are, and I'm sure that Tom will talk more about that to us as well. He's going to lead us through his journey from Dropbox to Facebook, from Messenger to Instagram, and from Oculus virtual reality and mobile phone augmented reality to the broader Meta group. He's sharing his experience on bringing AI from research into product and the lessons learned at startups and at Meta. And then he's going to discuss his practical experience with the hard work needed to take the amazing results of researchers and turn them into real-world shippable products. Okay, Tom.
Thank you. That was a very impressive introduction. I hope I can live up to it. So thanks to all of you. It's great to see the turnout. So speaking of Southwest, I currently live on the Lizard Peninsula in Cornwall, so about as far southwest as you can go without ending up in the ocean. So it's great. I'm really glad to be part of the Southwest community of technology people. So let's see. I've spent a lot of my career, at least the last decade and almost a half, working with different types of computer vision, machine learning, AI, deep learning type technologies, and I had a lot of things I've picked up along the way. A lot of definitely mistakes, some successes, but it's been a really great journey. And so I actually am not working at Personio yet. I'm starting that job on Monday as another principal engineer, so going to be working on building out technologies with them. So this is my week of holiday, is to come up here today. So common themes, I'm going to come back to this at the end, but I think one of the biggest things is it's never been a greater time to build technologies out and all of these magical experiences you can create with these new AI-based tools. It's truly extraordinary. I think dreamlike products that we can never even have imagined being possible a few years ago are now just, you know, almost type a few keys on your keyboard and suddenly you have something that actually demonstrates that promise. And that's when it starts to get really hard. So it's a lot of work, as people here have talked about, sourcing, curating the data, making sure things are properly IP licensed, making sure things stay on brand, making sure it's a compelling product experience, that just getting that first demo to work is great, but it's a lot of work to take things into production. So I'm going to talk about, so this is back from 14 years ago. This was actually using a stereo camera. It was creating a mirror-like experience where you'd hold up your hands and move your feet, and it would actually mimic the avatar on screen, would mimic this. So we used it at a science museum for a skeleton or muscles, show you your skeleton, your muscles, your nervous system, and things like that. You could do it. The idea was great. In practice, we had a hard time getting the computer vision output from the depth camera. And more to the point is, as soon as people tried to use it, these kids, it would last for about 15 seconds, and then they'd start jumping around on one foot or spinning around, and it didn't deal with people in wheelchairs. So we spent a lot of time getting this core mechanic working that nobody really used because it was just, everybody wanted to push it to breaking right away. And I think that's one of the things, is that people are really interested to explore where it breaks down. And you end up with a lot of user issues just because of that, because people are curious, they push the limits, especially children. Next, computer vision-based product I created. I tried to create an augmented reality casual game. This was actually using the phone as a gameplay mechanic, so you'd have to basically go on a treasure hunt to find objects to help solve platform puzzles. In this case, the mullions on the windows are being used to block those balls from falling, that's edges, and let the character win. So you find different objects of different colors, different shapes in the world, and use it as a platform mechanic. This is all working on doing computer vision algorithms on the phone. Quite fun. It turns out to be actually really hard to launch a casual game. It requires about $10 million worth of marketing to buy users, etc. But it was a lot of fun actually building this and getting that core loop of things running on the device in real time with machine learning, and that ended up informing later work. So after that, I worked as a CTO of a product-based company. This is relatively premature because this is in 2015. We were trying to create an end-to-end medical avatar to basically answer medical intake questions as you enter the doctor's office or as you leave, to answer follow-up questions and things like that. On an iPad, we were doing our own speech recognition, we actually had an emotional classifier that would look to see if the person was getting upset while they were answering the questions, and the avatar was programmed to back off. We did our own custom NLP, natural language processing, scripting, and it was quite fun to build, but it was another one of these things where in practice it's very easy for these things to go off the rails, be used in a noisy environment, people with accents, etc., and it's tough to do it. One of the nice things about this kind of environment is it's not a chatbot because it doesn't have to talk about anything. If you get it off the rails, it's a doctor's, it's somebody asking medical questions, so they can naturally just take them right back onto the rails of the conversation. So you don't have to worry about handling open-ended conversations. So that kind of natural give and take where the AI is asking the questions is an easier use case to handle as far as branding and scripting and things like that. So then I got the chance to join Facebook. One of the first projects we did was basically we went video first. So that meant that because of the challenges from TikTok and Snapchat, etc., we had to create a lot of interesting video experiences. So this was one of the first uses of generative content at Facebook, I think the first. We actually trained, so this is to take a picture and being able to alter it to resemble a famous artist. And this reasonably worked. We actually got it working on video, and it was shipped in Facebook and Messenger and Instagram, and it was a lot of fun, and we did get it to process video in real time. Difficult things is, video, this was really pushing the edge on everything, especially because Facebook's overall branding meant that we had to work with a lot lower phones. So we'd get it working on the high-end iPhones, and then we'd have to keep pushing it down and simplifying it to the point where it could ship on half of the handsets and things out there. And a lot of these things, generative content in general, you see the cherry-picked examples. You don't see all the outputs of it. So it's really great to see, it's really easy to say, oh, that looks awesome, but you don't see the 100 that the people who are making the product photos or doing the demos left out. And so a general consumer product where I'm going to just advertise a magical experience, you take any picture and it makes it look like a Renaissance painting or whatever, and it's very hard to pull that off because people are going to be taking pictures of non-Renaissance painting things like office buildings, and how do you transform that? And one of the interesting things too is we ended up working very closely between both the GPU, this is a graphical processing unit on the handset, and the CPU people, and it was basically an optimization war to get things working on Android, iPhone, CPU, GPU. It was really nice to see the competitive dynamic that created, where it ended up just advancing the speed of everything drastically. And then some of these models, you get them working in full resolution. The next step is to basically start simplifying them, chopping them down, quantizing the coefficients, doing as much as you can to compress it down, because it's really hard to ship these things, especially if you're going to require people to download them and work on handset. Even if you're going to run them in a data center, if a model that's 3 times larger is going to take 3 times more compute to run and be 3 times more expensive. So it's valuable no matter where you're running to do this optimization where you try to see, I got the whole model working on GPT-4. I'm now going to try to run it on a cheaper model. I'm going to try to see what I can do that's almost as good, and maybe I can get it so that it still stays within the performance that we'd like. We also created our own augmented reality stack. This was not using deep learning. This was using traditional computer vision models. So this is simultaneous location and mapping. SLAM, this was just before ARCore and ARKit came out, and you could go and put 3D content in the world, walk around it, and see it. So for a while, we shipped it on our own. This is another case where basically in a month this is working with Oculus-based code. This is the code used for the new inside-out tracking headsets, the Quest, that they've released. But this was using it on the phone. Porting it to the phone was easy at first, but to get it to run across all the headphones, all the handsets out there, all of the Android and iOS phones, and to get it to be small enough to ship, it's a lot of work. And this is, like, I'm going to keep coming back to this, is performance and consistent experiences and building things out as a professional product are going to take so much more of your time than you expect, just based on what these magic experiences look like. We also created, so this is something that everybody, especially in COVID, got to play with, which is person segmentation. It identifies who you are in the foreground, and you can blur the background or replace it or do funny effects on your face and things like that. We created our own version of it. This was our second deep learning effect, so we actually reused the runtime that we used for the style transfer. And it became part of the standard authoring kit, so we had a lot of user-generated effects from this. But we started building this. We thought, oh, this is great. Facebook has lots of selfies. We'll just train on them. Just about at the same time when there was a lot of regulatory oversight coming in. And that's one thing I'm going to come back to, is like being at one of the more regulatory constrained companies is actually you learn a lot about how to ship product in that kind of situation where you're constantly having to deal with legal and policy people to try to figure out what is and what isn't viable. Turns out that the massive store of billions of selfies that we had, we couldn't use to training data, so we hired a company that went out and got a bunch of models and people and did a beautifully shot selfies of everybody, which are completely unuseful, because what we needed were the normal kind of selfies that everybody takes. on a variety of relatively low quality to medium quality cameras. And they were taking it with professional 35 millimeter cameras and perfect lighting. So we couldn't train anything and get decent results out of it. So we had to redo it all with much worse cameras, much worse lighting conditions. It's tough to get that many people who are age and gender and racially diverse so that you don't end up with the problem of it working really well on only 18-year-old white males. So it's the kind of thing where it was actually a lot. And also that hair detail is hard because, as you've all seen in your Zoom calls, that it always messes up right around your head. People wearing headphones, people are wearing, funny things, and the couch in the background keeps popping out and things like that. So and one of the things that we kept holding ourselves to this really high standard of, it's got to be this so good to ship all these artifacts. Well, 2 years later, everybody was fine with the couch popping in and out and the headphones not working properly and the hair but people used it. And I think we held ourselves to a really high standard that ended up not actually being necessary. So we delayed shipment by about 6 months to try to resolve all that, take more training data, and it was actually good enough to ship, and we should have realized that. So then I shifted gears, moved to London, and worked in the integrity group, which is about keeping Facebook away from evildoers, basically. This is where we looked at first identity integrity attacks. This is where is someone who they say they are, and in some circumstances you might ask them to submit a driver's license or a photo ID of some sort. So that was. It's actually really tough to work with people's driver's licenses and passports. It's completely nothing but personal information. In many jurisdictions, it's actually illegal to even have a fake ID. So what we did though is we started looking at metadata and temporally clustering the data. It's one of these things where we had to really work closely with the legal people in the office and trying to figure out exactly what was and wasn't permitted. It turned out that as long as we used all the metadata instead of the actual ID data, that we could create a perfectly fine system for detecting these fraudulent clusters of attacks. So this is like, for example, a sweatshop in Vietnam that's submitting hundreds of fake IDs from Luxembourg. That would obviously, these kinds of things where they stick out, and then more subtle kinds of attacks. And then we also were this is some of the first use of multi-headed language, large language models. This is a couple of years ago now, where we trained classifiers to detect basically ground truth possible data of hate speech violations, new types of hate speech violations, because there's always new types coming up, new slurs, new opportunities for hate, new conflicts in the world, and using LLMs to identify, basically with zero-shot learning, give them something that says this is violating this new policy, identify a set of it, be human-trained example, then humans can go in and classify that. You can bootstrap that up into developing some, few-shot learning, and then use that to bootstrap up into a full, highly trained classifier, because you can't run LLMs at the scale of Facebook because it would take hundreds of data centers to be able to run these. So we bootstrap them into more traditional deep learning models that could be special purposed and ran with a much lower footprint. Let's see, I think, manual review is still necessary to make this work. There's a lot of manual reviewers, as Shell suggested, there's a lot of manual reviewers who are devoted to kind of keep hate speech and things out. Recap, I think I went through this before, but I think we're at the end. Any questions?
Questions? Chris, you have had one before, so I'm going to see if anybody else does, and if they don't, then we'll come to you. Have you got batteries again, Rachel? Yes, you're on.
So I think the most fascinating thing about this is it looks to me like you were using some of the really powerful technologies that have only just come into fruition in the last couple of years, like 6, 7, 8 years ago, in their earliest forms. So like computer vision on mobile devices was kind of unheard of back then. What do you think are the technologies that are on the cusp of coming into fruition now that you think are going to make the most impact? I'm obviously asking you to be prescient to an extent. So I'm not expecting entirely truthful answers.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what we can do of these, more advanced technologies on the handset. I think it's very powerful because it's privacy preserving. You're not uploading your data to the cloud. You're not using it as training data, and it's more responsive and and more local in general. It's really hard to say. I don't think I could have predicted the giant explosion of LLMs just in the last couple of years and just how much faster they got. So I think I'm learning not to try to predict technology as much as I used to think I could.
Thank you. Thanks. Any more questions?
Okay.
Nope. Okay. I
Thank
think
you.
you've just wowed everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
When you have all thought of the questions for afterwards, then do catch Tom outside when we finish. Right, so last up we have James Moffat, who is the founder, CEO and chairman of a number of businesses who are headquartered here in the Southwest and actually based at Winslade Manor, including New Future Ventures. Exist and New Future Ventures are delighted to be launching the first ever one-day hackathon. And that's for business leaders dedicated to fostering the next generation of AI ChatGPT style startups. It's a new partnership between Exist and New Future Ventures, and it's part of the Exeter Chamber Growth Partnership. And I'm going to hand over to James to tell you more about it.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Great to see you all here today. A lot of new faces and familiar faces. Been a really fascinating morning so far, hasn't it? Lots of really thought-provoking stuff. It's been absolutely excellent. I just want to thank the organisers and the speakers for what they've done today in terms of being here. Just to introduce me a little bit, give a little bit of context, I'm the founder of New Future Ventures. New Future Ventures is a venture studio. That's like a startup studio, essentially. And we work with founders, entrepreneurs, and business leaders to launch and build digital platform-based businesses out of the West Country that are capable of serving global audiences. So our big plan, our big vision is to try and work with 40 to 80 businesses over the next 10 years and build a really exciting cohort of those businesses, supporting them with the incubation, technology, funding, and all the bits that they need to do that. Now, at the heart of doing that, one of the things that we're always doing is trying to build IP and defensibility into these businesses and their business models. And that's, actually in a world where the front line is moving so fast all the time, as we've been hearing about today, that's quite a challenge. That's quite a challenge to do. But we talk about this concept of ways of building IP into technology that we call muck data. Right? Okay, nice little analogy for you there. And essentially made up of microservices, cloud-based technologies, data, automation, tokenization, and AI. So trying to find defensibility and IP creation at the heart of these business models using that kind of technology stack. And obviously a key tenet of that, and what we're talking about today, is AI. We work with a number of firms that are building AI into their business models. So SalesRook is a WhatsApp sales automation device, doing complex consumer sales in things like estate agency and travel and tourism. Corrigan is using machine learning for search marketing, all West Country-based businesses. And as part of that, what we really want to help you do today, along with Exist, is to take some of what you've learned today and to start applying it and think of ways that you can come up with ideas and opportunities that are relevant to your business and might improve your business. So as we said, we're delighted to announce the AI Prompt Hackathon that we're doing with Exist. It's going to be on February the 1st. It's going to be based here at Winslade Manor. We're going to take a load of applications from people, work for a full day with the 10 best of those applications, and help them take some of the ideas and the thoughts that have hopefully been provoked today and turn them into some kind of reality. Now, as I said, this is your opportunity to put some of the thoughts and ideas into action. So it might be creating a new product or service for your customers. It might be creating tools for your team. It might be chatbots and assistants. It might be something to do with document analysis or even document creation. It might be about analyzing and visualizing data sets to get insights out of them. It might be a tool to optimize or generate new revenue streams. I'm sure you've all had lots of thoughts today about things you'd like to try, and this is your opportunity to put some of those into practice. So, What do you actually need to be able to participate in this event? Well, first of all, you need a team, and it can be from 1 to 4 people to take part in that team. And very importantly, it's non-technical in nature, so you don't need to be an engineer. Engineers and developers are welcome, but it is not necessary for you to have those skills. We're going to provide you with a lot of support there. You need an idea that you can take away that you want to develop. And ideally, you need a data set or set of images or spreadsheet or some web-based data or source of data that you want to utilize as part of your tool in order to be able to do that. And of course, you have to be available on the 1st of February to spend a day with us. So having heard all the good ideas today and excitement, I've got a bit of a challenge for you. I love thought experiments. I love to, take that moment with a cup of tea, take some time out, often in the shower, not always in the office, and start to think about what ifs and ideas and things that are exciting and might be coming in the future. And the challenge I've got to you to think about today is this, and I want you to take this away and think about it and then apply online and talk to us about what your idea might be. What business process, problem, idea or opportunity is there that you might have thought about automating in the past? You might have explained had a go at putting something together, but traditionally you haven't done it because the output simply hasn't been good enough, because getting a good outcome is dependent upon a human applying context or expertise or knowledge or understanding or insight. So I want you to take away and think about that and think about what those ideas might be, and then get online and come and apply to take part in the hackathon. We've had some really exciting ideas today, but here's just a few that have been created from different workshops like this. A couple of these are ones that I use, and some are from a similar hackathon run by one of our partners, Paddle, where they work and build out businesses and actually turn them into revenue-generating businesses. This one I love. It's called Virtual Staging AI, and it takes pictures of empty properties and it dresses them. So it adds all of the stuff and makes them look better, so they're more inspiring, more interesting to help people sell properties. This one is for helping you build customer support bots and agents on your website. So using AI to make that experience that we've all had online with bots that can be very frustrating and quite linear, and make it more engaging and flexible and human. And you could do this to help qualify your sales leads or something like that. And Slides GPT, we've heard about Copilot as well. There's a lot of different versions of this kind of stuff out there to help you generate content and PowerPoints and information like that. Really not always to a standard that you want to be able to go out and present, but it can help you speed up the process of drafting that in the early stages. So what will actually happen on the day? Well, in the morning, as I say, we will work with 10 groups of people to refine and validate your idea. So we'll take you through a workshop to help you improve upon your initial thoughts, try and tailor it towards the technology, and really make it work for you. And then we'll spend some time teaching you how to use some of these tools. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure with the speed that things are moving. I know which tool we'll be using on the day because they keep changing so fast and there's always new ones coming out with new features. But we'll help you write a good prompt so that you know how to engage with them and start to build out that non-technical instruction that you need with the platform. And then in the afternoon, we'll help you build and create your own proof of concept. Okay, so you can actually have a go at building it. And then we'll demo and pitch them to the room. And we might even have some prizes for the best ones that are available as well. So here it is. Get your QR code out, get your phone out, read your QR code, take a picture of the link, sign up today. We'd love to have you there. I hope you've enjoyed the day. Thanks very much. And I'm going to hand back now. Cheers.
Lovely. Thank you, James. Thank you very much. I'm going to give you back some time today, which I'm really quite delighted about. But before I do that, I'm going to hand you back over to James Cater of Exist and the Exeter Chamber, and just to wrap up for the day. Thank you.
I started with a wow. Wow, thank you. 100 people in the room. I'm not quite sure how many we've got on the live streaming, but it's going to be 100 plus, and I don't know what the plus number is at the moment. But thank you. I'd just like to say, firstly, a big thank you to the speakers. I sat there with a little bit of anticipation this morning, but I'd just like to say, firstly, thank you to Sarah for keeping us honest on the time. Thank you to Michelle, not only for being the first person to order dessert last night, and then we all followed, but to a really insightful and really emotional talk today. Thank you. I'd also like to thank Tom, Dom, and Tom. And also Charlie. Charlie, thanks for being with us. Absolute pleasure to see you again today, and look forward to the continuing relationship. I'd also like to thank everybody whose brands are represented behind me, and I will be in trouble if I forget any of them. Our newest sponsor, Optimizing IT, thank you for being with us today. Our ongoing sponsor with a new person holding the baton, Martin, thank you for being with us today and for renewing the engagement. Also, a massive thank you to who I will call Mr. Co-Pilot. Where is Mr. Co-Pilot? I was actually sat outside when we did our first call today. A phenomenal discussion on turning these ideas actually into reality. Thompson Jenner, Paul, thanks for entertaining me over dinner last night, and thank you for not pulling my arm this morning. There's a backstory there, I can assure you. For Alex and team, the phenomenal team at BitPod, thank you for making us look good, sound good, and keeping us honest with the technology. Also, the great institutions that we have around us, Exeter University and also Exeter Science Park, all sponsors of the Exist program. I shared with you some questions that people ask me every day in my day-to-day business, and I shared with you the question, what should I be thinking about? What should I be doing about this new frontier of artificial intelligence, large language models, machine learning? Well, I hope we've given you a few things to think about today. That was our objective. And also, this isn't now about talking about the next Exist event, of which I have in my mind the evolving agenda already. I'm really excited about the partnership between Exist and New Future Ventures. James, thank you for starting the partnership there. And now it's about what you can do for your business, how you can take the examples, the real-world examples that you've heard about today, and we are now giving you the opportunity to apply those in your business today. So those competitions, those hackathons, that partnership will be the bridge between each of the Exist events going forward. 100 people in the room. Thank you, team. Thank you, presenters. Thank you, sponsors. Thank you all. Have a great day. Bye.